Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. John Douillard. Welcome to LifeSpa.com. And today I want to talk about the power of intention, the power of prayer, the power of distance healing. I wrote a 6-part article series with videos on my website at LifeSpa.com all about conscious healing. And I want to share with you some of the really exciting research that's been done recently, but also some of the research that's been done a while back on the power of our intention. And some of the older research was kind of really amazing. In one journal called the Foundations of Physics, which was a prestigious journal, they took studies from 1959 all the way to 1987. So these are all old, but they actually evaluated over 60 different studies, and they were looking at whether or not our intention could actually change the outcome of random event generators, things that they use for like lottery tickets and lottery balls and all that kind of stuff. And they found that it was so conclusive, they actually concluded it was robust and repeatable that our intention could actually affect the outcome of these random event generators. Kind of really interesting. They also did a study, and I think I lost it. All right. So I'm back. Somehow I lost my screen there for a second. They also did a study with 60 college students, and they found out that the college students were asked to see if they could actually decrease or increase or accelerate the growth of a bacteria called E. coli or decelerate the growth. And they found that it was actually significant. They were significantly able in both ways to actually both with their attention to increase the growth or decrease the growth of the E. coli. They were actually able to do that. In another study in a journal called the Alternative Therapies for Health and Medicine, they had 10 subjects, and they were trying to actually inhibit the growth of a fungus. And they were able to, they were about a yard and a half away, and for 15 minutes they would focus on inhibiting the growth of a fungus. And they were able to do that in 151 studies or cases out of 194 that were done. In 151 and 194, they were able to actually change the outcome or inhibit the growth of the fungi, which is pretty amazing. So how does all this work? So a lot of research was done way back when, but they didn't have a mechanism for that. Well, if we fast forward now, there actually is an emerging understanding of a mechanism for how intention can actually work. And how intention actually works is more than likely through something that our body releases. They're called ultra-weak photon emissions, that our cells, our DNA, releases photons out of our cells. And they're called, other name for them are called biophotons. And we release thousands of them per minute out of our DNA, and they can be coherent or incoherent. So if you're under a lot of stress and there's DNA damage, they're released as free radical oxidation, and they're very damaging, and they can actually damage our tissues. And but studies also show that our skin is both a receiver and a transmitter for these biophotons. And these biophotons are carrying information within our body, communicating information at the speed of light, which is kind of really amazing. So it's another sort of quantum physics way the body communicates with itself, so through light. But it also turns out that it communicates with others, that we're actually sending, we're transmitting and receiving these biophotons on a regular basis, which is kind of really interesting, which is what the 6-part series is really all about how the mechanism for understanding how prayer can actually work. Well, here's the amazing thing. These biophotons are actually released by me, but they're being picked up literally by, if you're watching this, then it's really weird, but Einstein called this entanglement or spooky action at a distance, where if I am creating an intention, or if I am releasing these biophotons, and because you and I are entangled because you're watching this video, and maybe you thought about you were going to watch this video yesterday, there is something called entanglement. So what happens is that my biophotons are actually being released, and they're actually headed in your direction. And you're perceiving those and receiving those from me, maybe even yesterday, which may have just gave you a slight thought about this video, and here you are watching it. And this is what Einstein called entanglement. and now the research shows that these biophotons are affected by intention. So if I have an intention to do a video or an intention to do anything, it can alter the function of these biophotons. So in other words, these biophotons, these ultra-weak particle emissions, photon emissions, are carrying our intention, which not only affects how you could sort of like think about somebody and then they show up, or they think about somebody and they call. All that kind of mysterious stuff starts to sort of make sense, right? But also, it also begins to help us understand how prayer works. There are so many studies on how prayer works and how amazing it is. In India, it's prayer and distance healing, and so many techniques where you could heal people from a distance. And now we have a mechanism for understanding that if you actually go into a meditative state or prayer, you create coherent emissions. So the science shows that when you actually meditate, do yoga, breathing, or meditate or pray, your biophotons are more coherent, and they are therefore more amenable to the intention. So if you go into a meditation or a prayer, and then you have this intention, the biophotons, which are released at great distances or transmitted at great distances, and also changed at the speed of light. Even instantaneously. Einstein called it spooky action at distance. So if I have that our observation of certain particles can actually change them at great distances, which is a whole quantum physics thing, which is quite fascinating. And I encourage you to watch this 6-part series on conscious healing and quantum physics, because it's quite amazing from the Ayurvedic perspective how some of these ancient dots really connect with some of the modern science, which is really interesting. Point being is that when we go into a meditation and we actually pray or have an intention, that intention can be carried at great distances at the speed of light, or maybe even faster, according to some more current research, which is amazing, and how that intention can actually be perceived and picked up by somebody else and actually affect someone else. In the same way, the negative biophotons can affect the damaging ones. They took a rodent who had really bad cancer, was radiated, and they put it in a cage with another healthy rodent. And within 48 hours, the damaging DNA of the healthy rodent, through the biophotons as the mechanism that was measured, that mechanism was measured, and it had a negative effect on the healthy rodent. So the negative impact of those biophotons can affect us and others, and therefore so can the coherent or positive effect of these biophotons. And that may explain why prayer works sometimes and why it doesn't work every time. And there's a lot of science shows it works amazingly well, and there's some studies that show it didn't work at all. Why is that? Well, it could be a couple of reasons. One, it could be because the photons that were released were incoherent and they weren't coming from a real deep place of prayer. And Ayurveda also says that you shouldn't be attached to the outcome. So if you're engaged in a process of trying to get a result from the activity, that has been shown in studies to have a negative effect on the genetic code of the person that you're trying to affect. But if you do it in what's called eudaimonic way, where you give in a way that is free and without expectation to get anything in return, it's been shown to have a positive effect on the outcome, on the genetic code of the person you're giving it to. Now, could that translate at great distances? Well, the biophotons surely do. So the science is beginning to knock on this door of understanding how we really are at some deep level really all connected, and that our intention and our positive biophotons that are coherent through having a sattvic or peaceful or kind or gentle or giving or caring nature can actually affect others at great distances, which means that we're a little bit more powerful than we think. And if we have the opposite effect, we can have against that negative effect on genetic code as well. So we are what we think, and it turns out so are others. So please check out this 6-part series on conscious healing on my website at LifeSpa.com. Thanks for listening. This is really fascinating information. I've got a lot of new articles coming out about this as well, so stay tuned. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. John Douillard.